Full. Great. I see people joining. We're just going to give folks attending the webinar a few minutes here until we get started. Thank you for all the folks who are already in the webinar. See about half of the registrants already here, and then we'll get started in like a minute or two. Dave, Arman, do you guys see my screen okay? Yeah. Okay, super.
Yes.
Let's see how many people we have. Okay, perfect. All right. Shall we start? Yeah. So just a little housekeeping first. In terms of the agenda, we're going to talk a lot about AI in the webinar, of course. First, we're going to talk about some of the trends we're seeing of how architecture firms are leveraging AI, deploying AI for design decision making. We have Dave Lamont, who's the executive chairman at Acelab, formerly was the CEO at Revit, who's going to lead that topic and share his insights. Then we're talking about AI's applications for all the material management that architecture firms or the design firms usually have to do. From there, we're going to go into a very exciting AI demo and exploring some of the use cases of where AI can be incredibly helpful for how architecture firms or design firms select, specify, evaluate the materials we need on projects. We also have some exciting examples from architecture firms that are leveraging AI and a few of these more technology innovations in this area of the practice towards the entirety of the workflow. And then we'll wrap up with sharing some insights from an early access program that and how 100 architecture firms, a group of 100 architecture firms have been leveraging that. And then finally, we wrap up with Q&A. For the Q&A piece, as we go through the presentation in the webinar, feel free to drop in the questions in chat as well. And then as we get closer to the end, we will make sure to either answer those in text, just on chat, or live. For folks joining with AIA credentials, and if you would like to receive a certificate for the webinar, please use the link in chat, which I believe should show up right about now. There we go. Thanks, Arman. And then you'll be able to submit the usual, your AI number, name, email, and so on. And then we'll make sure you receive your 1 CEU for this course. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dave to talk about AI.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Vardhan, and thanks everyone for attending today. Personally, I was very fortunate to be involved in what I think was the most important technological change for our industry, moving from two-dimensional drafting to three-dimensional parametric modeling. And I have to say, I'm equally excited today for what AI can be doing for our industry. I'll talk about a variety of topics, but I'm particularly interested in how AI can change the world of materials management and material research and specification. I think that's you're going to learn a lot today about that. Well, let's get grounded in some definitions to start. The way I think about AI today, we've probably all played with ChatGPT or Claude or some other natural language processors. Think about having read every single book in the world and you remember everything about it. And I could ask you any question about any book and you'd be able to answer it. I think that's the base level that we're all seeing today and being able to take and work with. And what is behind that is machine learning. So these language models are being essentially, they're learning, they're reading and learning everything that we've read and learned in school at a very, very rapid pace. And then the natural language processing comes in, and that you can interact with these learned models in a conversational manner, in the same way that you would ask a spec writer a question. You'll ask a search system a question, but in natural language, and get the answer in normal language, let's call it that. The other big technology piece is generative AI, and that's where you take all these learnings and create something new from it. Whether it's a report, whether it's a massing study, whether it's a new model, whether it's a recommendation for a material. And so we're seeing now in architecture and design, rule-based design, design optimization. We're going to talk a lot about material recommendations at Acelab today, predicting performance, and having the AI system not just answer questions and give you output, but kind of be a coach, to kind of be a support with you as you think through the problem you're trying to solve. And then driving all of this with materials to complement the designs that we all create. So if we can go to the next slide, I just want to give you some examples. So on the far left is Hierarch. Hierarch is actually a company I advise, and they have built some phenomenal technology where they can generate three-dimensional floor plans for production home builders. And from those home plans, they create a sales configuration tool that allows a buyer to actually configure their own home and then have drawings generated automatically and estimates generated automatically. Finch 3D is a fascinating new technology that's all around automatically generating floor plans, different varieties of floor plans automatically and very quickly. Veras in the center of the screen, really interesting technology around AI-based rendering. So you give a natural language prompt, you input a model. Maybe you did it in Revit or Rhino or SketchUp. You input the model and then give it a natural language prompt about how you'd like it to look. And then Veras will start giving you different variations of that visualization in a matter of seconds. We're seeing energy analysis tools from people like Ladybug, massing studies from one of Autodesk's products called Forma, which is really powerful for quickly doing urban planning and environmental design, at the very beginning of a project. And then, obviously, we'll be talking a lot about how Acelab is using material selection to make the best possible material choices on every project. So if we go to the next slide, let's start with, what's happening in your firm. So why don't you, if ever, would just take a second and tell us, what is your firm's current strategy to leverage AI?
Super. Wow, that's really interesting. I'm not entirely sure the attendees can see the poll results as well. If not, you will right after this, but super insightful to know the state of architecture firms right now just across the industry with the adoption of AI.
It's interesting that only 7% of the firms are actively doing something.
Right,
So
right,
it sounds like there's a great opportunity here
right.
for us to do more. So let's sort of migrate into the discussion about materials management and material decision making, which is really going to be the bulk of the discussion today. And sort of the strange thing is that materials management has not changed very much over the last 30 or 40 years. Yeah, people have built firm libraries using SharePoint or spreadsheets, or maybe they have a lot of material stuck underneath their desks. We open up 20 Google tabs at a time. We make stickies, but there isn't a coordinated workflow that is an accepted process, I believe, in architecture and design today. And if we go to the next slide, the problem with this is that architects, often for a lack of time or resources, or sometimes expertise or bandwidth, or even just the right set of tools, often go with what they know. Now, that's not bad all the time to go with what you know, because you may be going with excellent choices. Or you may be recycling specifications that are not state of the art any longer, because material innovation is occurring at such a rapid rate in the industry. How can any one architect, how can any one firm keep up to date with all the innovation that's occurring around sustainability, availability, cost, performance, all of these attributes, how we kind of measure them against one another? How can a single firm keep track of all this? And how do we make the best possible material choices if we don't have a way to keep track of this for our clients?
Super. All right. We have another poll here. Just to get a sense of from folks in attendance, how are you, your teams, your firm at the moment handling the material research across projects? Few more seconds to go, and then we're going to see the results from here as well. Great. Awesome. That's super helpful. So that is a trend that we hear a lot like from other architecture firms as well. Referencing previous project documents is at the top. That's almost like 3 out of 4 firms or the respondents are using that as a primary mechanism, followed by Google search, and then asking our peers, and then some other source. Thanks to everybody that submitted that poll. And then going to our next poll here, and that's showing up now on the screen as well. How about how are your architecture firms managing the firm libraries? I think that's going to be an interesting one as well. So you'll see some similar options as the previous poll, like old specs, drawings, specs, schedules, and so on. And then a few of these other tools like Excel, SharePoint, OneNote, so forth. Very interesting. I think the trend seems to be very similar. We're seeing old project documents as the leader, followed by some other source, and then very limited adoption of these other systems like OneNote, SharePoint, Excel. So great. Just to dive into a little bit more feedback that now we've gained from architecture firms across the industry, I think it tracks with the results that we saw in the poll just now. So recycling old specs remains to be a very well adopted thing across the industry for a few reasons. I think there's the trust, the reliability. It's hard to keep the material library updated. Reps that you don't know are hard to reach. And so you're seeing a few of these anecdotal data points that we have been able to gather just to understand the landscape of how most architecture firms across the industry manage the material choices at the moment. I think for us, being a team of practicing architects, one other really insightful thing just to understand and dive deeper into why a few of these problems exist was this insight that a lot of these platforms that we all use across the industry for different use cases, be it to find the product specs, code, cost data, sustainability data or metrics, CAD, BIM, any of the technical assets related to products of manufacturers, or simply the samples, inspiration, and so on. I think these tools in themselves are great. I think the general feedback we've been hearing from architectural firms is that they're very piecemeal. So anytime you're trying to make a new decision for a product or looking to update your firm standard towards something that may be a more sustainable or healthier alternative, you need all the pieces of the puzzle to be in place, meaning all these um, scattered data sets in one place for you to make an informed choice. And I think the feedback we've generally heard is that when it's too hard or too tedious to find all of these data points and have to manually combine them in one place, it's often a lot easier, and you have an incentive just to repeat something you've used in the past, for which you may already have most of this data. Um, it may still be scattered, but at least you've used that in the past. So I think it'd be interesting to hear from the audience in this final poll. What are some of your challenges that you've observed in your own workflows from other folks at your firm that you've heard of with managing the firm library or the firm standards? Super interesting. Yeah. So the scattered information being the top um, pain point in this regard. After that, hard to keep the product data up to date, ensuring all the people at the office use the firm library and it's not just the person who took on that task, and then the ability to keep track of data or the firm standards. Great. Thanks so much to everybody that answered the poll questions. We're going to go into a little bit more, just sharing what we're doing with Acelab as a project. So we are primarily a team of practicing architects, spec writers, interior architects, and other industry professionals. Acelab was started as an academic project across the architecture schools at Harvard and MIT, and then eventually we met Dave about 2 years back, and that's where we launched this as an offering for the entire industry. And we have a few other advisors from the industry as well, and we work with a host of other folks like spec writers or the technical architects in the industry. I think for us, primarily the reason why Acelab was really important, just in terms of the thesis behind Acelab, was that we truly believe that the materials we use on a project, they can make the difference between a good building and a great building. And internally, the way we think about a good building is uh, it's a baseline. It meets the standard of care, it meets the cost and the schedule, and it's totally fine to recycle the specs or the products or the firm standards that have existed for a very long time. But a great building, it often aspires to do a lot more beyond that, which can be you know, to reduce the carbon on the project or at a product level, to reduce the embodied risk on the project, and to optimize the firm standards, evolve them as you're doing projects, and then also to innovate with superior alternatives. And so we found that for any architecture or design firm to be able to easily optimize what you've used in the past and then upgrade that based on any of the criteria that's important on a project, be it the aesthetics, the sustainability, the durability, or the performance, the cost, and so on. You need to have all these very variable data sets in one place. And so using AI, we now for the past like 3 years or so, we have been scouring the internet to find this mess. It's the same mess that any architect or architecture firm deals with on a daily basis. We're going through every single manufacturer, most of the manufacturers, I should say, available in the US to create a new language around the decision making that us as architects or designers have to do for materials. And so that means all these isolated data points, be it information about the certifications or the performance, dimensions, aesthetics, options for design, the colors, and so on, being able to create and organize a data set so that on the right, you're seeing what structured data looks like. And our goal here is to create a central resource for the industry where any single product across a category or any manufacturer, their information is already available in one place. It's being updated in real time, and it's always in the same format. So now at this point, we've done this exercise for a staggering 8,000 plus brands. which equates to around 125,000 products. And in total, that equates to 20 million plus data points. So we talked about how AI can deal with huge amounts of data. That's where Dave started with just like a more like generalized application of AI that we're seeing around the world. And then now dealing with the materials with this exercise that we've done, I'm going to show you an example of how that can radically impact the workflow of any architect. So in this example, we're going to use this instance that an architect is looking for wood look flooring. And you're seeing here a chatbot appears. Essentially, it's an agent. It's an AI agent that will help the architect with some recommendations so that they can find all the data, all the answers they need easily. And so the AI is asking some details about the project. Here the architect says it's a new office building in Chicago, and we need help selecting sustainable flooring options. Something like LVT's durability and aesthetics, but we want something with a better environmental profile. So based on that initial inquiry from the architect, AI is already analyzing based on all of the data it's been trained on. What are the triggers? What is the architect or the designer at any firm optimizing for? In this case, the weights that it's found are starting with sustainability for the first rank, and then the pricing, durability, aesthetics. If the architect needs to reorder the list, they can do that easily as well. And so in this case, the architect says, okay, that's true. And then now the AI is recommending to the architect that there are like a few frameworks. Since you're optimizing for sustainability, there are 3 frameworks that you can choose from based on what is the most important to you in terms of the metrics. So here it's showing this like 3 frameworks generally well adopted in the industry, and then also doing a description or a summary. So we also see the value of AI here in the industry to be to help accelerate how things like the sustainability certifications or the labels are understood by the average architect. So there may be folks who are at any firm the topmost expert in this field, and there may be junior architects who are trying to learn more. So in this case, let's say the architect chooses the example of, yes, I would like to choose TMF as a way to filter the criteria. And then here we're going to go through, oops, sorry. So the architect chooses that. They choose the framework. And then for any architect, say, again, it could be a junior architect who does not know so much, they have a lot of information available here in order to understand what's behind the framework. Like, what are the sustainability triggers that it could help them to filter by? But on the other side, for any architect that is an expert, they have the ability to just end the search here. And if they go to see all 63 products, it would just show them all the products that may, as an example, have an EPD, HPD, and so on. So they just find all the details for the flooring options that have a few of those sustainability related documents available. In this case, the architect is asking for 3 recommendations from the AI. So now the AI, based on all the data our team is training this AI on, it's grabbing all the information, summarizing all the key facts per manufacturer, and showing the recommendation. So it's showing to the architect, you started with Armstrong LVT as your baseline. Here are 3 other manufacturers that may be a good fit for you to also look at. And then it's also including all the labels, all the information by the transparency, the carbon impact, and circular economy that it found across all the information from the manufacturer. And then we also tap into over 150 different data sources. Now, for some of the numbers that can be harder to quantify, the AI is also showing a relative scale across transparency, assessment, and so on for things like human health in terms of the ingredients or the substances used in flooring, VOCs, manufacturing, And then it's also asking the architect, is there anything else that your team is specifically looking for as a way to choose the right product? So the architect says, I want you to include information on the phthalates, and that's a toxic ingredient that usually goes into LBD fluorine. The AI, it parses through the EPDs and HPDs of all these 3 or 4 manufacturers shown over here to summarize which of these manufacturers don't have any phthalates as opposed to the others which may have some form of phthalates in the chemistry. And then also showing some information or like the source of that data, if it's sourced from the HPD, C2C, and so on. Now the architect is interested to find more information about the supply chain. For which manufacturers were any documents or reports available? Were the documents or reports self-reported by the manufacturer? If they weren't found, then the AI just shows none. And then for anybody else that met the criteria for supply chain transparency, labor verification, risk assessment, and so on, they can also find more reports or the sources available here. And then finally, the architect says, okay, I'm interested in Shaw. I'd like to learn more and get some samples or talk about pricing. And so here, for the architect, our system finds their local rep based on the details or the location of the project. The architect is able to schedule a call, request a call back, or speak to the rep instead of having to find their email or phone number in order to learn more about that new product. And then usually we see that for architecture firms, they report that it's not this like isolated exercise. Anytime you have to choose a product, you need to speak to the other stakeholders as well. And for them, you need to share a summary. You need to be able to present what you researched, what was the baseline, which may be something recommended by the owner, the contractor, or just a, a historic firm standard. And then what may be like some other superior alternatives for the architect to consider on that project. So based on the interaction with the AI, it generates a report for the architect, which includes information about the project name, any of the stakeholders included by the architect, details of the project, and then all the information that was shared in this interaction previously. Now, the architect also asked the AI to find and research some information about the pricing per square foot and the carbon. And so that's included in the report as well. So this is supposed to be a direction for the architect or the project team, to take into account that they may have been historically thinking about Armstrong, and for $1 or so more square foot, they may be able to optimize for a product with a way superior environmental profile. So I'll pause here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Arman actually to share a little bit more about a few of the examples of how architecture firms are using this workflow tool.
Thanks, Vardhan. And it's really cool to see that we're able to now manage and reflect on information, not just based on one specific criteria. And I think that's been really important to compare something from a sustainability perspective, but also a cost perspective. And I think you'll see what's quite interesting with some of the work that we're doing here. What we've noticed the other firms are doing to also evaluate materials. And so when we're thinking about project delivery and materials, something that's come to become very important is understanding what the stages are that materials go through. And so often when firms that we work with are using tools to evaluate materials, they're not just evaluating the material immediately, they're starting by planning the project and understanding the framework of information that they need for materials. And so that's determining which spec sections that they need to capture. And often they're pulling from a master format template that they might have, or a template from a previous project, which, as y'all mentioned from the poll, is clear what a lot of people are doing, looking at previous projects. From there, people then evaluating, doing Google searches, doing different types of searches across different places, including reaching out to their peers to understand what products are available to actually evaluate those materials. And then really where the rubber meets the road is just coordinating and tracking all those selections. And that happens back and forth between the research. And finally, where all of us have to do on a regular basis to actually document and send that work out to your consultants and so forth. And so really what we've noticed is that all of these things are quite piecemeal, and it's really important to make sure the generic selections that you're making early on from your templates all the way through the products that you're selecting are happening in a way that are all interrelated. And ultimately that you're able to pull that information from a single place as opposed to finding all that scattered information around your different folders, your different previous projects. And so building out a place to do materials selection across all these different areas that you need to focus on top of a firm library is really, really critical. And to always be pulling from those pre-vetted selections. Now, building out a firm library can be one of the biggest challenges for firms. I know a lot of folks have even tried starting them in their practices, but these often fall by the wayside because it's hard to keep product data up to date. And so what we're looking at here is a place where the firm library itself is also built on top of the building product database. And so that means pulling information about simple things such as height or width, or things such as certifications around certain products, all of that coming from a pre-vetted database as opposed to from just information that you're inputting yourself. And so that's really important. So really the foundation is a building product database with unbiased information, 85 to 90% of vendors across any category. From there, you curate down to a firm library that is the main thing that most people have access to. And then from there, you're also doing all of your project delivery on top of that and are pulling from that firm library on a regular basis. So I want to show you what that looks like in practice for a firm that's actually looking to start a project, work all the way through the different selection stages and pull from that library that's incredibly curated. So here we go. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. So when we jump into this tool we call the Material Hub, this is effectively where all these different components are connected together. And so that's all the way from planning your project all the way down to actually automating the documentation and pulling from the historic information around your projects and firm libraries and things like that. And so jumping into a project right here, the first thing that most folks such as yourself are doing and all architects have to do is actually pre-plan the schematics of that project. And so the best way to do that, and often what we've noticed are people are pulling together the sections and relevant areas that they need to fill products in. And so what that might look like is looking at all the master format sections that you need to capture data in. And so that might be thermal and moisture. You might be pulling in openings, doors, and frames. You want to capture all the areas that you want to have products in before you actually start making selections or even having generic direction on where those selections are. And so you can see all of this information is already captured within this database where all of those selections can just be turned on really quickly and added to your framework. And for the next time you do it, this can also be templated because you want to be able to start up projects really fast and not just have to do this every time from scratch. And all of these components are really, really important because starting every time anew on every project is where we're noticing the most difficulty for most architects. They're having to find different pieces of information looking at old projects and so forth. So with this schematic in place, say a project architect is putting this together, you can now go through and easily add products directly from a pre-built firm library. And that might be selections that someone on your team has put together, basis of design items, things that are already curated, removing things that you don't want, and only accessing the information that you need to pull together for that specific selection. The firm library is right there directly from the project, as opposed to having to go find it on a different location. It's all embedded into one space. Now, when you're looking at selections for the projects, you're not only pulling from that overall schematic, but you're also looking at different options, right? And so we want to be able to manage not only selections that we're definitely making, but options as well. And so an architecture firm might be putting this together in an Excel spreadsheet and in a couple of different locations, trying to manage all the different selections that they have. So a really great thing about something like this is that you have a smart spreadsheet where you can put all the selections into one format, pull product data from the database itself that we mentioned, that the entire foundation of this tool is built on. And that means pulling master format sections, maybe some options around what the different glazing packages are, or pulling in information about style and finish. All of that is coming in from the database and allowing you to pull in information that's vetted by a team of architects and spec writers, as opposed to having to input that information yourself and watch it get outdated maybe over time. And so all of this is captured within our database. On top of that, you're pulling it from your firm library, And then you're managing selections also with your team through some custom information that you can add on top of the product data. That might mean having a bunch of products in consideration as you're starting to evaluate these things and starting to understand what the different pieces of data around the products are. You're starting to know, okay, this is maybe something we're not going to go work with, but you can at least reference back to it whether or not it was selected in the future on a project. Now, when you're evaluating these products, you're not only doing this in this typical format of what the products are, but you also want to see the product data. And that's something Vardhan was talking about at length, about what pieces of information are really critical to your team to eliminate and add products to the final selection. And so this same data, and the really great thing about it all being associated with each other, is that any of the selections can also be seen in a more visual format with all of that product data loaded up. We have a few different products loaded up here. You can even see the rep and reach out to them if you want more information than there is on the database. But as we scroll down, you can see there's really, really high level information about the product data, including any generic cut sheets, spec files, CAD documents, BIM files, anything you need to actually evaluate and work with the product that's available on the web. The product descriptions are normalized and comparable against each other. Even previous information about projects that you've used the products in will be available because that's all baked into your firm library, as well as other projects on the database. So you're able to see what the previous selections were, which is often what most people are doing by looking at previous projects and previous project documents. But as you can see, with everything being normalized, it's really easy to start eliminating the information and the products that you don't want to see. So you can see a couple of standard sizes. You may not want those. They may not match your filter criteria, but you're looking at all of this in one clear, easy format to compare the products across vendors and across products very easily. Our team has even painstakingly taken the time to go through and map this out visually, so it's easy to evaluate whether or not the information is certification or an R value or U value. All of this stuff is put together in a way that's really accessible to an architect, whether new to the industry or really, really experienced. So say you're able to find the information, narrow down to 3 products that match your needs for this, but you still want to get a little bit more information. You may also want to consider reaching out to the rep. And often it can be really tedious to go find a rep. And so having that information baked directly into this as well is a quick way to reach out to folks. You can go ahead and request information from the rep. And what that'll do is open up a conversation directly in the project. All the other collaborators in the project will have access to this conversation. So you're not losing this information in email, in previous project architects, and previous designers. All that's being captured here, and some basic and cursory project details are also captured here. So the conversation can happen really, really quickly, and you can get an answer as immediately as possible to make sure that you're able to make that final selection on a project, understand where that's being deployed through the schedule, and then push it by clicking adding it to summary directly into your spec planner so you can see the overall selections in your project and all the different variations related to it. And finally, in order to actually deliver for your clients and do that really quickly, all of these selections can be pre-filtered into views, different ways to get it out of here, effectively putting together a quick way to export it and share it out to those folks, pull it into your Revit files. All of this data can be captured very, very quickly in those final formats because you're putting it together in one simple connected place with information and data baked in, along with your custom information placed on top of that. And the really great thing is that any of this information that you're learning, that you're picking up, it's being pulled back into your firm library. Folks are able to access that firm library, and you're able to see which projects or offices are also deploying these, where it was previously used, and what locations are actually picking them up. So all of this information allows you to, for the next project, really quickly start it up from a template, a spec plan, and then also all the assets or the products that you like using as well. So I think what's been really, really incredible to see with this cohort of 100 firms that we're working with is to have projects that are starting from very little information that people are pulling from previously in schedules that are kind of baked into folders into really, really smart projects that folks are able to access directly from other projects and also from their firm library. And it's making it a lot easier for people that are building out firm libraries to disseminate the information out to their different project teams. So I think, Vardhan, you're going to move to talk a little bit more about what that program looks like and how people have been giving us feedback around that as well.
Yeah, let's do it. Yep.
Yep.
Super. Yeah, so we've been incredibly fortunate that in the past 6 months, we set up this cohort of some of the leading firms in the country to come and into this AI early access program. And our goal here was we want every single architecture firm in the US to be utilizing like the material hub and this AI agent that we built on top of it to make smarter material choices. But it's new technology, and the best way to train new technology to fill in any gaps in the workflow so that any architecture firm does not need half a dozen different tools in the tool stack. Even if they're free, we recognize as a team of architects that that's where you can easily just lose a lot of the project time or valuable design time. And so to fill in all the gaps, about 6 months ago, we started working with this cohort of 100 firms. And we've been incredibly, incredibly grateful for their feedback. With that, we have actually advanced the platform a whole lot more. And then due to the feedback that we heard from them about how much it's helping their firm with all the project teams across all the office locations, we've added 50 new spots to this program. And the program is entirely free. Our goal here is to like learn more from real active usage of architecture firms in the country so that we can keep advancing the technology. We keep launching new things on the product roadmap. So next, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about what are the firms that like these 100 or so firms in the group, what do they have access to in the program, and then a few of the things on our near-term product roadmap, which again for folks in the program they get the early access to. So our team, we have a team of account managers who are all ex-architects, by the way. Arman leads that team. And the first thing we're doing for all these architecture firms in the cohort is we get your previous project specs, schedules, submittals, and so on. And then our team is actually parsing through all of that data to create your firm library. So that day one of using the platform, and like the entire workflow on the platform, you already have all your historic product decisions in one place. And then you can use that as a way to either optimize them to superior alternatives on a project or to update the firm standards entirely. Any support you need, any feedback you share about, hey, we need XYZ export or report from the platform, the folks in the program, they're really helping us to inform the product roadmap. We train the staff, so we organize onboarding across the entire team, and then we make sure that regardless of if it's the sustainability team or spec team or design technology folks in a firm, everybody has a clear incentive to be involved in this onboarding and have an export, that's the most relevant to them, like their responsibilities of the firm that they can use Acelab for. And then finally, here are like 3 things. If you go to the next slide, Arman, yeah. So 3 things that we're launching very soon. And again, for folks who are in this program, in the early access program, they get the first immediate access as soon as we launch this more like beta functionality. So the first one is BIM integration. So this we're going to be launching in about 2 weeks, where any firm will be able to sync their workspace on Acelab with Revit. And the value here is that it's a 2-way sync. So all of your information about the schedules is being integrated with Revit in real time. And then any information or any data in Revit, you don't have to actually go to Acelab to find that. You just have a plugin through which you are able to export the quantities, assign the products inside of Revit, import all the families of the schedules that you need. So like the goal there is like to duplicate the amount of work or data transfer and really like emphasize the interoperability between Acelab that you can use for all like the decision making and the management around the materials, and then you have the BIM for like all the 3D and the documentation needs. And then soon we're also launching things like the cost and the carbon. Right now it's going to be mainly embodied carbon, and then in the near term we're going to be integrating an API through which we'll also have more of the operational stuff on the platform. And then finally, assemblies. So our goal really here is like with these 8,000 or so like manufacturers that we've organized all of their detailed technical information for in one single database. We see the true value here for a firm or a project team to be able to optimize based on the assembly. So you can see the trade-offs across the board, across the entire assembly at once. And so like right now already, most of the exterior and interior manufacturers are in Acelab's database. And so this assembly feature has been a strong demand from the users in the program. And we're super excited to launch all these three things in the next like 60 to 90 days. So I'll go back, if you just go back, Arman, to the first slide about the early access program, and then from there we can go into the Q&A. We still have a little bit of time, so let's see. Yeah, so we hope you're interested, and if you like a demo for your entire firm, if you would like a lunch and learn, in the post webinar survey, you will have a link for that. So please feel free to indicate your interest there, and then somebody from the Acelab team will reach out and will share some more information. And then I think now we're ready for Q&A. So for folks, if you have a question about AI in general, about any of the material we discussed in the webinar, I believe there are 3 questions already. And now we're seeing more show up here. So maybe we'll start with Jill. I think we know Jill. I think we've met Jill before a few times, but it's really good to see you, Jill. Will there be a way to differentiate between selected in design as opposed to built in? How are the substitutes or alternates managed? Yeah. So one thing that was really important for the team with the Material Hub was we had, again, as a team of practicing architects, we had like used tools which required an architecture firm to essentially adapt their own internal data, how like all the naming, all like the taxonomy they use internally at the firm to a different system. So we actually took the opposite approach, where any firm can adapt Acelab to make it their own and to work it based on any of the taxonomy, any tags and so on they use internally at the firm. So that's also, I think, very relevant to how you can assign the substitutes or alternates. So when you go to like the status or in approvals, you can actually add the tags in. There's already a few that I believe our system includes as placeholders, but anything else that's important for the team to add, you're able to add that too. And I'll actually let Arman also jump in on selected opposed to as built, how we manage that.
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways that we work with things that are constructed versus things that are selected. And so the initial one is with building out the firm library. Often folks are wondering between specs and submittals. I think submittals are a really great way to actually capture what was used in projects and add that in your firm library, so future folks can get access to it. And then secondly, like Vardhan mentioned, tracking through using those custom fields allows you to not only add your own personal information to the product and the selection over time, but also allows you to make it specific to your firm. Not all firms necessarily track things exactly the same way. So whether it's an alternate or a substitute, or if it's a matter of what was constructed versus what was selected, you can add in new pieces of data associated with the product for your team to then reference in all future projects as well. So it's really the custom fields and the editability and the incredible flexibility around them. And we've seen a lot of different firms use it for different stakeholders that they have, or different types of selections they want to manage within a project, with internal approvals even as well. So, thanks, Jill. I think it's a great question.
Super. Oh, that was helpful, Jill. Next, I think Jeffrey asked in all caps, where can we sign up? So in the post webinar survey, Jeffrey, we're gonna have a link for a demo. Like right now in this cohort of architecture firms that we're working very closely with, we are curating which firms enter the cohort. So we'd be really excited to learn more about your use case and like where you see values from the Material Hub from using this AI tool. And we'd be happy to onboard you and your team. But we will reach out to you shortly after the webinar. Thanks so much for your interest. Bruce asks, any plans for integration with SpecLink or any other spec writing programs? Yeah, that's on our roadmap. I think for us, the priority has been like realizing that there's a big gap for architecture firms to organize all this mess that's usually at the start of a project in like the more like SD and DD stages. We're really focused on that at the moment. And then eventually for us, like the goal is to be able to create all that documentation export from Acelab itself. So right now already for most firms, they can automate the schedules and be able to sync that with Revit. And then eventually we'll be doing the same thing for specs and so on. I'll actually let Dave also like chime in on that question as it relates to the product roadmap.
Yeah, I also think that we want to focus where the biggest gaps are. There are good tools to develop specifications today, but there aren't good tools to find alternatives and find the best possible material that you may want to write a spec for in the future. And that's the gap that we're trying to fill the gap around material decision making. And so you'll probably see us focus there for the next 9 months on those types of applications first.
Yeah. Do you want to take the next one, Armand?
Yeah. So this is from Rami. Re-AI noted a prompt-based workflow. Are you finding challenges in prompting that require specific training or improving how one may interact with the system? I think that's a good one for
That's
you
a
to
great
take
question. Yeah. So it's actually really interesting. As we started to develop AI, the most important thing we asked ourselves internally was, why would an architect have a superior experience on Acelab using our AI as opposed to ChatGPT or any of these more generalized AI technologies? And I think for us, the answer was a ChatGPT or a Gemini, they're not specifically trained for the use case in the architecture industry as it relates to the materials. And so what we've done is like we've got a team of technical researchers who are again from the industry. They're curating the data that we're training this AI on. And that's why the answers are a lot more superior. Plus, on top of that, to back up where the data is being sourced from, it's from our own database. So it's not going in real time to a manufacturer site, in which case it's hard to QA. Like usually when we talk to architects and when they report, or we try to generate a spec sheet on ChatGPT or try to find a substitute, the answers are horribly inaccurate. And I think the reason for that is it's doing its best guess in real time. In our case, we are a lot more intentional with how we're curating the data and training this AI to answer the most important use cases for any architecture firms as it relates to the materials.
We're also training a co-pilot to be able to help you so that you may ask a question. I'm looking for an aluminum window in Florida with an R factor greater than X. And our co-pilot may come back and say, well, you said it's Florida. Do you care that it's hurricane rated? So you may not remember to ask us everything. So we're going to try to anticipate based on the information we do have, what else could be useful. But the whole idea is not to become a prompt expert, but to really talk to the system the way you would talk to a colleague in the firm and ask them a question about a material option that they may know about.
Yeah. Great. Next we'll go to Monica. So Monica is asking, will Acelab require a paid subscription later? I've heard Acelab gets paid by manufacturers. So does that mean that we will be directed to use those manufacturers? Some projects cannot specify specific manufacturers. I'll actually let Dave take that one. I know he's super excited to keep Acelab free for the entire industry.
Yeah, so I'm passionate about this. So everything we've shown you today is free and will be free. Now, and there won't be a bait and switch on you. But I do want to be clear that we may offer some things in the future where we integrate third-party software that we pay for. One of those potentials is operational carbon analysis. those are things. So we could introduce some things in the future that are an upcharge, but the base system that we're showing you around the material library, the firm library, the schedules, the spec planner, all of those things we intend to be free forever. Now, what we do, the manufacturers are the ones that pay us. However, we are building a database of all manufacturers, whether they pay us or not, because quite frankly, the system's useless to you if we don't do it that way. And so the manufacturer that can have a direct conversation with you in the platform, that is the manufacturer that pays us. But you can still tell us you want to reach out to manufacturer. Any manufacturer will be returned in the search. There's no advertising in the platform. We want transparency and accurate searches for you because we want you to trust the platform and feel confident that you're going to get the best possible answer.
Yeah, that's right. And just to also, to double down on that, I think one big frustration for a lot of us on the team while we were practicing was that when you often go to other like spec platforms and so on, they're all pay to play. So they only list information for manufacturers that have a relationship with them. I think for us, it was really important that all the options, whenever a firm needs to find alternates, substitutes, and so on, all the options for a category, most of the manufacturers are represented in Acelab. So the platform itself is entirely unbiased. And then to Dave's point, when manufacturers pay Acelab, it's to have their reps readily available to support architects. But the initiation is always from the architect. So it's only when an architect reaches out to a manufacturer that they can respond to that inquiry from the architect, which might be for, to get a price code, lead time, samples, certification information, reviewing a project, and so on. Hope that's helpful, Monica. And now maybe to go to Jeffrey, can the AI system evaluate or compare substitutions during the construction phase? Yeah, so actually, that is a really important use case, even from like spec writers during CD. Whenever a junior architect shows a BOD that like the spec writer has not used in the past, they don't know too well, and now they need to find substitutes. Or if it's a 3-part spec and you need to list or equals, how to find those easily. And now on top of that, during the construction phase, that's where I think there's a lot of value in 2 regards. One, we've got the pricing data, which is what our team has prepared, analyzed using RS means and a few of these other like data sources in the industry. And then we have tried to weigh that over every single manufacturer. So it's available on a product level in the system already. And so during the construction phase, when you need to find substitutes, value engineering, and so on, you could easily do that, tap into that database for cost on Acelab, so you don't have to go to another database and to find the cost information from there. And then for the manufacturers that you need to reach out, you need to get answers from, a price code from, and so on. And at that time, the reps are also available in the system. So if there are manufacturers that you don't know so well, they're not in the Rolodex of your firm, you still have an easy line to be able to reach out to them.
And I want to stress that all the views that we've shown you today are shareable with your contractor, with your owner, with your developer, so that people can collaborate on the decision-making process, because we know you're not making those decisions in a vacuum. And we're seeing a lot of contractors join the system and owners join the system who want to enforce some brand standards, or contractors that are looking for alternatives when supply chain issues arise and they need to find a substitution during construction.
Yeah, great. I think Arman, if you want to take the next one.
Yeah.
So one we get frequently.
Yeah. And we touched on it briefly with discussing how we keep information private to the architects, even with vendors on the site. And so when it comes to any data around your firm library or your projects, all of that is kept private to your company and your company alone, both from any other folks on our platform, anyone else doing any searches, all of that remains private to you. Any custom data, any firm library information you're adding in, that also remains completely private. Anything that you share with us to help build out the library also remains private and is only used to pull products into the firm library. And then finally, anytime you do want to share information, you can do that on a case-by-case basis. And until that moment, it actually remains fully within your system. And we've even had additional questions about employees leaving companies and coming back to companies and things like that. And what's really great about a lot of the related collaboration features is that there are granular permission settings. And so if someone were to leave your company, you can remove them. They don't have the ability to take their whole firm library with them either. And they don't have to have access to that information anymore. And you can even bring in collaborators just to specific projects and not even give them access to your overall standards. So it's a lot of control that you have, and everything remains completely private. Any projects you have, you can even make a little bit more generic so other folks don't have direct access to it as well.
I think after the webinar, we will also share, if it's helpful for you, Monica, like our terms of use for the platform. I think that may be a good resource. Next question we have from Lance. It's nice to see you, Lance. Have you run across any resources to better understand AI as it relates to the AEC space? I feel like we're experiencing this every day. And like when we talk to architecture firms, it's super clear to us that there's a lot of excitement and anxiety in most firms about how to use AI. My sense on this is like the generic AI tools that you hear about in the news all the time, they're not really at a point right now where they can be very useful. So I feel like, at least for me, the best way to learn is just to talk to architecture firms or to other stakeholders in the industry about what AI tools they're playing around with, to see like which ones are actually useful as opposed to more just like hype in the moment. And if you try a prompt, the promise of AI in like the more of the generic tools breaks like instantly. So I do think like the best way at the moment is just to like talk to people who are using it, who are thinking about it all the time, or at least like starting to deploy that at their firms' practices. Next question we have, how often is the data updated? Could you also talk about how the firm data is handled? Yeah, that's a great question. So our team is doing a good job to keeping data up to date across a category. So example would be flooring, windows, anything, 4 to 6 months at a time. And generally we found that based on the frequency that manufacturers, they tend to update their product lines, offerings, SKUs, and so on, that seems to work really well. And then for manufacturers that are in our network, they also have the ability to update their data more instantly. So if they're updating information about the products or the design options automatically, that's also shown on the platform. How do we handle the firm data? So yeah, all the information from the firm, like any of these documents that we ingest from a firm, it's not being used to train our own AI. So it's only being used on the platform to create or to generate your firm library on the platform. And then any information in the library or that was received or organized based on the documents you shared is yours. Like we're not using that for any other application in the platform. So I hope that's helpful. And again, we'll share with you as well, like the terms of use, which has like a lot more detail about like how we handle data too. All right, I believe we're at time, a few minutes over time. So I'd like to thank all the people that attended the webinar. As I mentioned, there will be a post-event survey where you will be able to indicate your interest. If you have any other questions that we weren't able to answer during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us as well. We have been really, really excited to explore this project and learn very quickly from the feedback of other architecture firms in the cohort. So again, hopefully for people in attendance, if you would like us to organize a lunch and learn for your entire firm, or for us to like do a deeper dive and a demo for your firm specifically, please do stay in touch and we'd be happy to chat more. All right, I think we're good to end the webinar.